The hospital bill sat on my kitchen counter like a death sentence. $92,000. That's what it would cost to give my daughter a fighting chance. Maya was only 9 years old, and the rare neurological disorder eating away at her brain didn't care that I was a single father working 2 jobs. The experimental treatment in Boston had an 80% success rate, but without it, the doctors gave her 8 months, maybe less. My hands shook as I dialed my parents' number. They lived 15 minutes away in the same house where I grew up, a beautiful colonial with a pool and meticulously maintained gardens. My younger brother Daniel still had his high school trophies displayed in a glass case in their living room. They'd never been short on money or pride. Dad answered on the 3rd ring. His voice was cheerful, distracted. "Marcus, what's up? Your mother and I are just heading out to the club. I need to talk to you both. It's about Maya." My voice cracked on her name. "Can I come over?" 20 minutes later, I sat across from them in their living room, the same room where I'd opened Christmas presents as a kid. The same room where they'd told me I was making a mistake keeping Maya when her mother abandoned us both. My father's expression hardened as I explained the situation, the diagnosis, the treatment, the cost. "That's a substantial amount," he said finally, his tone the same one he used when reviewing bad quarterly reports at his investment firm. "I know. I've liquidated everything. Sold my car, moved to a cheaper apartment, picked up night shifts at the warehouse. I've got $23,000 saved. I need help with the rest." I looked at my mother, hoping to see something soften in her face. "She's your granddaughter." My mother glanced at my father before speaking. "Marcus, you know we love Maya, but we have to be realistic about our resources. We're not made of money." The lie hung in the air between us. My father had just returned from a 2-week golf trip to Scotland. My mother drove a car that cost more than I'd made in 3 years. Their resources included a vacation home in Aspen, and retirement accounts I'd overheard them discussing at Thanksgiving, worth well over $2 million. "I'm not asking for a gift. I'll sign anything you want. A payment plan, interest, legal documents. I just need help saving my daughter's life." My father stood, signaling the conversation was over. "We'll think about it and get back to you. These decisions can't be rushed." Think about it. My daughter had 8 months to live, and they needed to think about it. I left their house feeling hollow. That night, Maya asked me if she was going to die. She was sitting up in her bed, her stuffed elephant clutched against her chest, her eyes too knowing for a 9-year-old. I held her and lied, told her everything would be okay, that I'd figure it out. She fell asleep in my arms, her breathing steady, her small body trusting me to protect her. I'd never felt more powerless. 3 days passed with no word from my parents. I called twice and got their voicemail both times. On the 4th day, my mother finally called back. Her voice was strained, apologetic in that way that precedes bad news. "Your father and I discussed it extensively. We just can't commit that kind of money right now. We have our own financial obligations to consider." "What obligations?" The words came out sharper than I intended. What could possibly be more important than Maya's life? Don't take that tone with me, Marcus. We're entitled to spend our money as we see fit. You're 34 years old. You should have better financial planning, better insurance. Better insurance? As if any insurance covered experimental treatments. As if working 60-hour weeks at 2 jobs constituted poor planning. The conversation ended badly, with my mother hanging up after I said something I probably shouldn't have. But grief and desperation have a way of stripping away politeness. The weeks that followed were a nightmare of phone calls and rejections. I contacted every charity, every foundation, every medical assistance program I could find. Most had waiting lists stretching months or years. Maya didn't have months. I started a fundraiser online that gained some traction, raising $8,000 from strangers who showed more compassion than my own blood. Teachers at Maya's school organized a benefit dinner that brought in another $3,000. Every dollar felt like a drop in an ocean. Then came the phone call from Daniel. "Marcus, hey." My brother's voice carried that excitement he got when something good happened to him, which was often. "I wanted you to hear this from me first. Ashley and I are engaged." Ashley was his girlfriend of 8 months, a woman whose family owned a chain of car dealerships across 3 states. I'd met her twice at family gatherings where she'd barely acknowledged Maya's existence. "That's great, man. Congratulations." I tried to inject enthusiasm into my voice, but exhaustion made it difficult. "Thanks. And dude, Mom and Dad are being incredibly generous. They're paying for the entire wedding. Ashley's been planning this since she was a little girl, and they told us not to hold back, that we should have exactly what we want." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not to hold back. Exactly what they want. "That's really generous of them," I managed. "I know, right? We're thinking next spring, maybe a destination thing. Ashley's always wanted to get married at one of those exclusive resorts in the Bahamas. Mom's already talking to wedding planners. It's going to be epic." After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my cramped apartment and tried to understand how my parents could refuse to help save their granddaughter while offering unlimited funds for a party. The math didn't make sense. The morality certainly didn't. Maya's condition worsened through the fall. The tremors in her hands became more pronounced. She started having trouble with her balance, stumbling on level ground. The headaches came more frequently, leaving her curled in bed with the lights off, whimpering in pain that medication barely touched. I watched my daughter fade incrementally, her bright curiosity dimming along with her physical strength. She stopped asking about school, about her friends, about the future. She knew what we both couldn't say out loud. My parents visited twice during those months. Brief, uncomfortable visits where my mother made awkward small talk and my father checked his phone repeatedly. They never stayed longer than 30 minutes, always citing some pressing engagement. Maya asked me once why Grandma and Grandpa didn't visit more. I told her they were busy. Another lie to add to the growing pile. Meanwhile, Daniel's wedding plans consumed every family conversation. My mother called me occasionally with updates, seemingly oblivious to the obscene contrast between our situations. The venue alone was costing $65,000, she told me excitedly, and it was absolutely worth it because the views were breathtaking. The dress was being custom designed by someone who'd worked with celebrities, a $18,000 creation that required 3 fittings in New York City. They were flying in a famous florist from Los Angeles because Ashley wanted specific orchids that only grew in Thailand. I listened to these updates while sitting beside Maya's hospital bed during one of her bad episodes, her small hand in mine, monitors beeping their steady warnings. "You should see the engagement photos," my mother continued. "The photographer charged $5,000, but they're stunning. We're using them for the save the date cards." $5,000 for photographs, more than I'd raised in a month of desperate fundraising. "That sounds nice, Mom. You'll be at the wedding, won't you? I know things are difficult, but it's important family be there. Daniel specifically wants Maya as a flower girl if she's feeling up to it. As if her neurological disorder was a mild cold that might clear up by spring. "We'll see how she's doing," I said, the only honest answer I could give. December arrived with brutal cold and worse news. Dr. Peterson, Maya's neurologist, called me into her office for a conversation that required tissues and closed doors. The latest scans showed significant deterioration. We were past the point where the experimental treatment would help. The window had closed while I'd been scrambling for money that never materialized. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I wish I had better news. We're looking at palliative care now, keeping her comfortable. I'd estimate she has 3 months, maybe 4. 3 months, a season. Enough time to plan a birthday party or take a vacation, but not enough time to do all the things I'd promised Maya we'd do together. Not enough time for her to grow up, fall in love, make her own mistakes, live a full life." I called my parents that night. My father answered, and I could hear party sounds in the background, laughter and music and clinking glasses. "Dad, Maya's dying. The doctors say 3 months. The treatment deadline passed. It's too late." There was a pause, then my father's voice, quieter now but still distant. "Marcus, I'm very sorry to hear that. Truly. We'll come visit soon. You had the money, you could have helped, and you chose not to. That's not fair. We made a difficult decision based on many factors. You can't lay this at our feet." "Where else would I lay it? You're spending over $200,000 on Daniel's wedding, but you couldn't spare $92,000 to save your granddaughter's life. Help me understand that math, Dad." "Those are separate issues. The wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime celebration for your brother. It's not our responsibility to solve your financial problems. My daughter dying isn't a financial problem. It's a tragedy that you had the power to prevent and didn't. He hung up. I sat there holding my phone, listening to the dial tone, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The relationship I'd had with my parents, already strained, cracked completely. Whatever familial bond had existed was broken beyond repair. The wedding invitations arrived in January, elaborate affairs with gold foil and satin ribbons. The ceremony would be held at an exclusive resort in the Bahamas, 3-day celebration with welcome dinners and beach parties and a farewell brunch. My mother included a note asking me to RSVP soon so they could finalize the head count with the caterers. I looked at the invitation while Maya slept fitfully on the couch, her face drawn and pale, dark circles under her eyes that made her look ancient. The invitation probably cost $50 per person to produce. Multiply that by the guest list of 200, and they'd spent more on informing people about the party than most people earned in months. I didn't RSVP. Maya died on a Tuesday morning in late February, 6 weeks before Daniel's wedding. She went peacefully in hospice care, her small hand in mine, her breathing gradually slowing until it stopped. The nurse who pronounced her death cried. She'd known Maya for 3 weeks and cried harder than my parents would. I called my mother with the news. Her first words after a perfunctory expression of sympathy were, "Oh no, the timing is terrible. Terrible timing, because the funeral would complicate wedding preparations that were in full swing. We'll have to figure out the arrangements carefully," she continued. "Daniel's wedding is in 6 weeks and we have so much still to finalize. Maybe we could do the funeral early next week? That would give us time to deal with everything before the wedding events start." "You want me to schedule my daughter's funeral around my brother's wedding?" "Don't be dramatic, Marcus. I'm trying to be practical. Both things need to happen, and we need to coordinate. The family will be gathering anyway for the wedding, so maybe we can combine some of the travel." Combine the travel. As if mourners attending my daughter's funeral could multitask by staying for the wedding celebration. I hung up on her. It became a habit. The funeral was held on a Friday, 8 days after Maya died. I arranged everything myself, paid for it with money borrowed from my boss, a man who'd shown more compassion in 6 months than my family had in a lifetime. The service was small, maybe 30 people. Teachers from Maya's school, neighbors from our building, co-workers from both my jobs, people who'd known Maya and genuinely cared. My parents arrived 25 minutes late. Daniel and Ashley came with them, all 4 dressed in black, but somehow making it look fashionable rather than mournful. They'd been at a final tasting for the wedding reception, my mother explained in a whisper, and the restaurant had been across town. They stayed for the service but left immediately after, declining to come back to my apartment for the small gathering I'd organized. My mother hugged me briefly, her perfume overwhelming, her touch quick and impersonal. "We'll call you soon," she promised. "We're just swamped with wedding preparations right now, but once things calm down, we'll get together properly." I watched them leave, watched them walk out of the cemetery and back to their expensive cars, back to their comfortable lives where my daughter had been an inconvenience and her death was simply bad timing. Daniel's wedding happened exactly as planned, 6 weeks later. I didn't attend, which apparently caused significant upset in the family. My mother left 3 voicemails about how my absence was hurting Daniel, how I was being selfish, how everyone understood I was grieving, but life had to go on. Life had to go on, their lives anyway. Mine felt permanently suspended in the moment Maya took her last breath. I blocked their numbers after the 3rd voicemail. I deleted my social media accounts after seeing the wedding photos my aunt posted. Hundreds of images showing my parents beaming, my brother ecstatic, everyone dressed in expensive clothes celebrating at a resort that probably cost more per night than I earned in a week. The total cost, I learned later from a cousin who contacted me, had been $280,000. 3 times what could have saved Maya. The grief counselor I started seeing asked if I'd considered forgiveness. I told her I'd consider it when I understood what I was forgiving. Choosing a party over a child's life didn't seem like the kind of thing that required forgiveness. It required consequences. But what consequences existed for parents who'd let their granddaughter die so they could throw their son an expensive party? They lost nothing. Their lives continued uninterrupted, their social standing intact, their retirement secure. Meanwhile, I lived in a one-room apartment filled with Maya's things, working 2 jobs to pay off debt incurred trying to save her life, waking up every morning to the absence of the only person who'd mattered. Years passed. I existed rather than lived, going through motions that felt hollow and meaningless. I paid off the medical bills gradually, sold Maya's things when I couldn't stand looking at them anymore, moved to a different city where everything didn't remind me of her. I changed careers, went back to school, built a life that looked normal from the outside. Inside, I was frozen in that hospital room, holding Maya's hand, feeling it grow cold. I never contacted my parents. They never contacted me beyond a single letter my mother sent the first Christmas, full of platitudes about healing and family and moving forward. I burned it without responding. Daniel sent a birth announcement when he had a son 2 years after the wedding. I threw it away, unopened. 5 years after Maya died, I received an unexpected phone call from my uncle, my father's brother. He was calling to tell me that my parents were in serious financial trouble. My father's investment firm had been caught in a fraud scandal. He'd lost his job, his professional reputation, and most importantly, his retirement savings. They were facing foreclosure on their home and looking at bankruptcy. "I thought you should know," my uncle said. "Your father's too proud to reach out, but they need help. Daniel can't afford to bail them out. He's struggling himself after some bad business decisions. You're doing well now, I heard. Maybe you could help them." I should have felt something, triumph or vindication or satisfaction. Instead, I felt nothing. They were strangers who happened to share my DNA. Their financial crisis meant as much to me as Maya's death had meant to them, which was inconvenient timing, but ultimately irrelevant to my life. "Thanks for letting me know," I said, and ended the call. 3 weeks later, my father showed up at my office. I was in the middle of a meeting when my assistant buzzed to say my father was in the lobby. I almost had security remove him, but curiosity won out. I wanted to see him, to understand if anything had changed in 5 years. He looked diminished. That was the first thing I noticed. The confident man who'd dismissed my desperation with talk of resources and obligations had been replaced by someone older, uncertain, almost fragile. He stood in my office doorway like a supplicant, hat in hand literally. "Marcus, thank you for seeing me." I didn't invite him to sit. "What do you want?" "I know we haven't spoken in a long time. I know things ended badly between us." He twisted his hat in his hands, a nervous gesture I'd never seen from him. "But I'm asking, hoping, that you might be willing to help your mother and me. We're in serious trouble." "What kind of trouble?" He explained. "The fraud investigation, though he insisted he'd known nothing about his partner's illegal activities. The frozen assets, the legal bills, the loss of his reputation and career, the mortgage payments they couldn't make, the savings depleted by lawyers and settlements. They needed $95,000 to save the house, to avoid losing everything they'd built over 40 years. I listened without interrupting, watching my father reduced to begging for money from the son he'd dismissed as financially irresponsible. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "I know I have no right to ask," he finished, "but your mother is sick with stress. This house is all we have left. I'm asking you, as my son, to help us." As his son. The relationship he was invoking was one he'd violated fundamentally when Maya needed him. "You need $95,000? Hope flared in his eyes. "Yes. Even a portion would help. Anything you could manage. We'd pay you back. I'd sign any terms you wanted." "That's more than what I needed for Maya's treatment." His face went white. "Marcus, I asked for $92,000. You told me you couldn't afford it, that you had to think about your resources and obligations. Do you remember that conversation?" "I remember. I've thought about it every day since she died." "Have you?" I walked around my desk, standing close enough to see the age in his face, the fear in his eyes. "Because it seems like you thought about it just enough to spend 3 times that amount on Daniel's wedding 6 weeks after Maya's funeral. $280,000 for a party, but not $92,000 for your granddaughter's life. We made a terrible mistake. I know that now. I'd give anything to go back and change it." Anything except the money when it mattered. He had no response to that. What could he say that would matter now? No apology could resurrect my daughter. No expression of regret could undo the choice he'd made. "I'll help you," I said finally. Relief flooded his face. "Thank you. Marcus, thank you. I don't deserve this, I know I don't, but thank you." "I'm not finished. I'll give you exactly what you need, $95,000. But there are conditions. Whatever you want, I'll sign anything. First, I want you to admit what you did, not to me, but to the whole family. I want you to send an email to everyone, every aunt, uncle, cousin, explaining that you refused to help save Maya because you chose to spend the money on Daniel's wedding instead. I want the exact numbers, the full truth." His face went from relieved to horrified. "Marcus, that would destroy our relationship with everyone. We'd be ostracized." "That's not my problem. That's the consequence of your choice. You can have the money or your reputation. You can't have both. Maya didn't get both life and dignity. She got neither. So choose." He looked at me with something like hatred, but desperation won out. "Fine, I'll send the email. Second condition, after I give you this money, you never contact me again. No calls, no letters, no showing up at my office or home. You take the money, save your house, and forget I exist. Just like you forgot Maya existed the moment she became inconvenient. She was my granddaughter. I never forgot her. You called her death terrible timing. You went to Daniel's wedding 6 weeks after her funeral and smiled for 300 photographs. You lived 5 years without reaching out once, and now you're here because you need something. That's not remembering, Dad. That's using." The silence stretched between us, filled with everything we'd never say, never repair, never reconcile. "Do you accept the conditions or not?" "I accept." I wrote the check that afternoon, handed it to my father in front of witnesses, and watched him leave my office for the last time. He looked smaller somehow, beaten by circumstances he'd helped create. I felt nothing watching him go. No satisfaction or triumph or closure. Just the same emptiness that had lived in me since Maya died. The email went out that evening. My uncle forwarded it to me, probably thinking I'd want to see it. My father had kept his word, laying out the timeline and the numbers with brutal honesty. Within days, the family responded exactly as I'd predicted. Phone calls stopped. Social invitations dried up. The people who'd attended Daniel's lavish wedding suddenly had scheduling conflicts when my parents needed support. They learned what isolation felt like, what it meant to be judged and found wanting by people who mattered. My mother called once 2 weeks later, crying and begging me to tell everyone it wasn't true, that I'd misunderstood, that they'd tried to help. I reminded her of the second condition and hung up. Daniel sent angry texts calling me vindictive, cruel, saying I destroyed our parents over something that happened years ago. I blocked his number without responding. Over the following year, I heard updates through the family grapevine. My parents had become pariahs in their social circle. Friends who'd enjoyed their generosity for decades vanished when the truth came out. My mother developed severe anxiety, couldn't leave the house without having panic attacks. My father took a job in retail, working for minimum wage at 65 years old, humiliated by customers half his age. They saved the house, but lost everything that made it worth having. Some people might call what I did revenge. I called it justice. They'd made a choice that killed my daughter, and they'd lived 5 comfortable years without consequences. I simply ensured the consequences caught up. The money I gave them was a gift they didn't deserve, mercy they'd never shown. But it came with a price, the truth. And truth has a way of destroying comfortable lies people build their lives on. 10 years after Maya died, I'm living a life she'd be proud of. I remarried eventually, to someone who understood grief and loss. We have a daughter we named Maya, honoring the girl who should have lived. I run a nonprofit that helps families afford experimental medical treatments, funding it with money I earned building a successful business. I've helped save 14 children so far, 14 lives that could have ended the way my daughters did. My parents live 30 miles away in the house I saved. We've never spoken again after that day in my office. I see them occasionally from a distance at family funerals or weddings I attend briefly out of obligation to other relatives. They look old and worn, carrying the weight of their choices in their stooped shoulders and haunted eyes. My mother tried to approach me once at my cousin's wedding. I walked away before she could speak. People sometimes ask if I've forgiven them. I tell them forgiveness is for people who've earned it through genuine change and remorse. My parents have shown neither. They're sorry they lost their comfortable life and social standing, sorry they were exposed and judged. But I've never received an apology for Maya, never heard them take real responsibility for choosing a party over their granddaughter's life. Daniel reached out last year through a mutual friend, saying our parents were asking about me, wondering if enough time had passed for reconciliation. I sent back a simple message. When Maya comes back, we'll talk. Until then, the answer is no. I sleep well at night knowing I gave them more than they gave Maya. She got nothing, not even the dignity of being remembered at a party they spent $280,000 on. They got $95,000 and the consequences of their actions. In my mind, I was generous. The story ends not with resolution, but with reality. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. Some choices can't be undone. Some relationships can't be repaired. My parents chose what mattered to them, and I chose what mattered to me. They chose a wedding. I chose truth and justice for the daughter they let die, and I'd make the same choice every single time.